Welcome to the Power of Purity podcast, the show that empowers men to experience their sexual gift in a healthier way. Now here's your host, Tony Ingrassia.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Power of Purity podcast. I really appreciate you being with me for this episode today as we continue with part 7 of this series, 10 things that every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex. And if you've been with me the past several episodes, you know that we've now covered 7 of these 10 principles. And the 7 principles we've covered, I'll review quickly. Number 1 was this: your wife wants you to understand that healthy sex occurs within the context of a healthy relationship. Number 2, your wife wants to know that she's the focus of your sexual exclusivity. Number 3, your wife wants to know that during sex, you want her more than you want the sex itself. Number 4, your wife wants you to understand that her sexual rhythm and appetite might be very different than yours. Number 5, your wife does not want to feel like every time you touch her or kiss her, it has to lead to sex. Number 6, your wife wants you to learn and utilize what she likes during sex. And number 7, your wife wants to know that you're attracted to her and think she's desirable. And that therefore brings us to Principle 8 of the 10 things that every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex. And Principle 8 is this: your wife wants you to understand that it takes her some time to get in the mood. And by the way, you guys, I'll just mention that when I began working on this particular series of episodes, and I was beginning to formulate the ideas for this particular series, the 10 things every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex, I was sharing my early ideas with my wife, and she's the one who immediately suggested this principle to me, and she said something like this: help the guys understand that it takes some time for their wives to get in the mood, because women are not like men, and they normally don't get turned on like the flip of a switch, and it takes a little time for us gals to get in the mood. And she then went on to comment and to explain that for so many women, and I suspect that this would be true for your wife, that our wives are busy with life, and life is crazy, and life is overwhelming, and life is helter-skelter, and your wife's day is jam-packed, and she's trying to do the laundry and go grocery shopping and get the kids up and get the kids off to school and make lunches and make dinner and get the kids ready for bed and doing everything that she has to do. So half the time, she's not even thinking about sex. It's like it's not on her radar. So all of a sudden, her husband turns toward her and indicates his interest in the possibility of, hey, could we maybe have sex? Could we have some intimacy together? And therefore, it makes perfect sense, this principle number 8, your wife wants you to understand that it takes her some time to get in the mood. So in view of that, I'd just like to say thank you to my precious wife for helping me to include this very important principle in our present study. And to be honest with you guys, when my wife started talking about this, I immediately thought to myself, well, duh, of course, this is so obvious. This needs to be on this list of 10 principles. So I really appreciate my wife helping me to understand this. So guys, in view of this point, as the old adage says, men are like microwaves and women are like crockpots. I think it's very important for us to understand that our wives typically move much slower than we do when it comes to sex. And therefore, we need to learn to slow things down and give our wives the time they need to get warmed up. Or said another way, she doesn't want you to rush things or to move too fast. She wants you to slow down and take it easy and give her a chance to warm up and to ramp up and give her a chance to get into it. And when I was doing some research on this particular point, I came across a few ideas and quotes that I'd like to share with you. One said this: patience is key when it comes to pleasing a woman, and most dudes are all about instant gratification. You want to skip the previews and go right for the feature film. But here's a secret. Women need the previews. They rely on the previews to help them get turned on and revved up for the main feature. So say it with me, guys. Foreplay is not a suggestion, it's a requirement. And here's another quote from another article. If you have any hope of giving your lover a standing ovation, you need to slow everything down when it's time to get down. In fact, a good rule of thumb is to go 3 times slower than you normally would. Women are more like slow cookers than frying pans. So when you're brushing up on your foreplay skills, remember that the best sex comes to those who wait. And another article that was on WebMD entitled Sex, Why Foreplay Matters, Especially for Women, said this: it's particularly important for women to have successful foreplay because it takes a woman a longer time than a man to get up to the level of arousal needed for orgasm, says Dr. Ruth Westheimer, a psychosexual therapist, professor at New York University, and lecturer at Yale and Princeton universities. A man can just think about sex and have an erection. But for most women, wanting sex is not enough, says Westheimer. Foreplay serves a physical and emotional purpose, helping prepare both mind and body for sex. Many women need to be kissed, hugged, and caressed to create lubrication in the vagina, which is important for comfortable intercourse. And the article then goes on to say, foreplay also helps the clitoris to fulfill its so important role. It has the same characteristics as the penis, Westheimer says. Blood flows into the clitoris, and in order for a woman to have an orgasm, there must be lubrication in the vagina, but also the clitoris must get erect. Stimulation is the key to achieving pleasure. But women are more than just their biology. After all, a girl's got feelings. Westheimer says a woman especially needs emotional assurance that the man she's about to have sex with really wants to be with her. The time and attention given during foreplay can communicate that message in a way that the wham, bam, thank you, ma'am approach simply cannot. And then, guys, another article entitled 7 Things About Foreplay Sexperts Really Want You to Know makes several key points, including these, of which I've selected 9. Or, in other words, the article presents 7 main principles, but I've extracted 9 ideas that I thought were just really interesting to me. So the first one is this. Number 1, foreplay is really important for most women because they tend to take a longer time to get in the mood. Foreplay helps lubrication flow and makes intercourse all the more pleasurable. Number 2, sensuality is key to great foreplay. Holding hands, nearness of heads on shoulders, caressing hair, arms, back, and so on, says Jeanette Raymond, Ph.D., who is a licensed couples therapist. It builds up the sexual tension and arousal. Number 3, stretching out the sensuality is very erotic. No rushing from caressing to intercourse, Raymond advises. Instead, foreplay is something to be lingered over. After all, it's often the longest part of the entire sexual encounter. It's seduction. It's conversation. Touching the body. It's all that. And that should go on throughout lovemaking. Number 4, over time, many couples become more efficient with sex at the expense of satisfying foreplay. Many people get lazy about it as a relationship progresses, so that unfortunately a kind of efficiency sets in that essentially says, let's just get this orgasm accomplished, which shortens foreplay and takes a lot of the pleasure away from lovemaking. Number 5, all too frequently, people tend to go right for the erogenous zones when they're in bed. That's nice and all, but there are other parts of the body that shouldn't be overlooked during sex, and touching them helps build up the excitement. The biggest mistake many men make with women is to jump to the genitals right away and ignore the face, the neck, the earlobes, and just about any other part of the body. Number 6, Dr. Raymond tells couples to savor the whole body rather than just try to get arousal through kissing and then moving to intercourse. The abruptness of it makes it feel like the foreplay was just a con. She suggests learning where your partner's erogenous zones are and then waiting a bit before doing anything with them. Don't shoot for them right away, she says. Allow the anticipation, like a tease. Number 7, communication is the key to good foreplay, says the experts, both beforehand and during the act itself. Talk about what you want. Have a sexy conversation with your partner about what you like. It's also important to give your partner feedback in the moment. During foreplay, it's good to make sounds that say, "This feels good." Number 8, think outside the box when it comes to what to do as foreplay. Even though most of us just focus on the fooling around part of it, there are other things that can serve as great foreplay too, whether it's massage, dirty dancing, wearing a sexy outfit, doing a little striptease, or just holding hands. Flirting is a form of foreplay, and women universally enjoy massage. Receiving a shoulder massage might be just the foreplay a woman needs to relax into sex. Don't forget about all those enticing little tidbits that can put you in the mood. And finally, number 9, the bottom line is this: foreplay is just as important as sex itself, if not more so, especially for women. So treat it that way. Most women need a lot of foreplay because they tend to be double taskers and are doing a lot of things, so getting into the mood for sex isn't as easy for them. When they're thinking of the kids and the laundry, it's good to have foreplay to get them slowly and gradually into the mood. So guys, in conclusion of this point, we need to understand that we should not race to the finish line. We should slow down. We should take our time. We should give our lady the opportunity to get into the mood, because most women quite naturally like and appreciate foreplay. One woman said, "I'd happily let my husband kiss my neck, shoulders, and stomach for hours, but he's prone to move toward my lower erogenous zones within minutes." So guys, let's remember that our wives are like crockpots and not microwaves, and therefore they will deeply appreciate our kindness and our sensitivity and patience as we learn to slow down and take our time and not to rush and to savor every delicious moment that we have with them, because as this principle informs us, principle number 8, your wife wants you to understand that it takes her some time to get in the mood. And with that being said, guys, it brings us to the 9th principle of the 10 things every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex. And the ninth principle is this: your wife wants you to know that she needs emotional connection with you to be sexually present to you. And I'd like to begin this principle by acknowledging that it's really very complementary to the very first principle of the 10 things every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex, which was this, if you'll remember, principle 1. Your wife wants you to understand that healthy sex occurs within the context of a healthy relationship. Because, guys, I'd suggest that if a husband and wife are experiencing a reasonably healthy relationship with each other, that there will be a reasonably authentic sense of emotional connection between the two of them. So again, this ninth principle goes along with the first principle, but this concept of emotional connection is so important that I felt like we should go above and beyond the call of duty to bring special attention to it. So guys, I think there might be several different ways that this point could be stated, and if we're really smart, we're going to see and understand the importance of this idea that women need a sense of emotional connection with their husband in order to be sexually present in the relationship. Or said another way, women are more interested in sex, and they respond with more passion during sex, and they want more sex, and they enjoy sex much more, and they feel safer during sex when they feel an emotional connection with their husband. Or here's another way to say it: good emotional connection equals good sexual connection, and bad emotional connection equals bad sexual connection. So if you happen to be a guy listening to this and you happen to be married and you happen to be interested in a better sexual connection with your wife, and you happen to be interested in maybe having more sex with your wife, then you better be interested in having a better and deeper and more authentic emotional connection with your wife. Because the fact is, guys, the two go together, the emotional connection and the sexual connection, and you can't separate the two. And I really hate to say this, but this concept of the importance of the emotional connection in relationship could be a kind of bad news for a lot of guys, because the fact is that a lot of guys are not good at connecting on an emotional level with their wife or with anybody else for that matter. And I'm not sure exactly why this is, but I suspect it has something to do with both the natural and the cultural differences between men and women. And I'll say just a few words about each of them. What I mean is that on a natural level, I think that in general, most women tend to be more in touch with their emotions than most men, and women therefore tend to feel their feelings more than most men feel their feelings. And women tend to be more honest about their feelings and emotions than most men are. And women tend to be less afraid of their feelings and emotions than most men. So women quite naturally tend to be more open to their feelings and emotions, and women tend to care about feelings and emotions more than most men, and women tend to share their feelings and emotions more than most men, and women tend to relate to other people on an emotional level more than most men do. And on it goes. And by the way, since we're talking about the emotional differences between men and women on a natural level, did you know that there are literally physical, organic differences between the male brain and the female brain? And I was learning about this, guys, as I was doing a little bit of research around this topic. And the reality is that the female brain has better connection pathways between the left hemisphere of the brain, which is involved in speech, and the right hemisphere of the brain, which is involved in emotion, which means that when women talk, both sides of their brains are being activated both the speech side and the emotion side. But when men talk, they primarily use the left hemisphere of their brain, which is the speech side only, while the right hemisphere, which is the emotion side, essentially remains inactive. So doesn't it therefore make perfect sense that guys tend to be less emotional when they talk than women do? And then, guys, just a few thoughts on this concept of the cultural level that contributes to the emotional differences between men and women. I think there's a sense in which little boys are raised very differently than little girls, and there's a whole different set of standards and expectations that are placed upon little boys. So little girls are expected and allowed to be more emotional than little boys, and little girls are expected and encouraged to feel their feelings and to share their feelings. And little girls are even expected and allowed to cry. But little boys, on the other hand, are taught that they should be strong, and they should be tough, and they should be rough, and they should not be too emotional, and they shouldn't be pansies, they shouldn't be wimps, and they shouldn't be too weak, and they shouldn't be scared, and they certainly shouldn't cry. So on both a natural level and a cultural level, little girls and women are invited and encouraged to acknowledge their feelings and emotions, and to experience and express their feelings and emotions, and to relate to others on an emotional level, while little boys and men are encouraged to suppress and or deny their feelings and emotions, and to not express their feelings and emotions, and to not really relate to others in their relationships on an emotional level. And for these reasons, I think these dynamics become embedded in the mind and the heart and the soul of many men, and it becomes a kind of framework through which many men see and relate to the world. And these realities and dynamics, therefore, come to define the style of relating that becomes normal for many men. And therefore, these dynamics naturally follow many men, if not most men, into their various relationships in general, and specifically into their marriage relationship with their wife. And therefore, as a result of this, I'd advocate that many men are operating in the context of their relationships from a kind of disadvantaged position or a kind of handicapped position, because they're simply inexperienced or uninformed in their ability to relate to others or to connect with others on an emotional level. And for this reason, these same men can often feel quite uncomfortable and disoriented if emotions begin to emerge in a relational context, and would even resist the display of any such emotion. And that particular thought reminds me of a very poignant situation I was involved with at one time, several years ago, when my wife and I were attending a particular funeral. And of course, it was a very sad and difficult situation for many of those in attendance because of the loss of someone that was so important and dear to them. So in my estimation, the presence of emotion and the display of emotion in this particular situation would not only be quite natural and quite expected, but also quite appropriate. Yet, despite this reality, one particular prominent man who was present quite forcefully and persistently insisted over and over again that no one present should cry or display any such emotion. And of course, I personally felt the demand this man was placing upon those present in a situation like this was not only completely misguided and inappropriate, but was also very sad. Because, again, in my estimation, the display of emotion in a situation like this would not only be quite natural and quite expected, but also quite appropriate. And by the way, it should be noted that this particular man happened to be a very prominent and very successful and very powerful and very wealthy businessman. And I don't know for sure, but I suspect he's the kind of man who's very accustomed to and comfortable with operating within the realm of the business world, which he has quite successfully conquered, primarily from the use of his intellect and cognition and his ability to calculate and reason and formulate and to plan and to execute accordingly. Or said another way, I suspect he's very adept in his ability to operate and function from the realm of his intellect and very deficient in his ability to operate and function from the realm of his emotions. And therefore, when this particular man was thrust into this situation that was quite naturally charged with a very high level of emotion, which he was very unaccustomed to, and no doubt quite uncomfortable with, he quickly defaulted to what was normal for him and attempted to manage the situation in the same way he would manage a difficult situation or crisis at work, which is to say, we will not allow our emotions to get in the way here. We will not allow our emotions to distract us in any way, and instead we will process this situation through our intellect, our reason and cognition, which will leave no room for the interruption of our feelings, which means that nobody here should be feeling anything, and nobody here should display any emotion, and certainly nobody here should cry. And how sad is that? And just one final thought here concerning this story before I leave it. In this particular situation, this man happened to be a high-powered and successful businessman, but I'm not sure that's necessarily important to the story, because the fact is, I think many different men would respond in a situation like this in very much the same way that this man was responding, whether they were a successful attorney or a doctor or a plumber or a ditch digger. Because I think so many men are deficient and very uncomfortable in their ability to relate to people or to situations on an emotional level. And therefore, they have the tendency to handle and respond to emotional situations in much the same way that this man was attempting to manage the situation by essentially suppressing and denying any emotional acknowledgement or involvement whatsoever. And may I say that while this particular modus operandi may be effective in insulating a man from feeling his emotions, and effective in allowing him to navigate through any particularly difficult situation, it's at the same time that this tendency to suppress and deny emotional involvement and engagement is very counterproductive to successful and authentic relationship with those who are close to him, such as his relationship with his wife. So, with all that being said, you guys, I'm not sure that the primary purpose here is to present a teaching to guys on how to be more emotionally connected in their relationships, but I would like to share just a few thoughts that I have before we finalize this particular point. So, I have 6 quick principles on how men can be more in touch with their own emotions and therefore be more emotionally connected in their relationships. And guys, I see from the clock that I'm essentially out of time for this particular episode, so I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and interrupt this particular point, and I'm going to save these 6 principles concerning men and their emotions for our next podcast episode, which I anticipate will be the last episode of this particular series, 10 Things That Every Man Should Know About His Wife When It Comes to Sex. It's going to be part number 8, the last episode of this series. So I hope you're able to come back and join me next week as we continue. We're going to finish up Principle 9, and then we'll discover what the 10th and final principle is, So I'll look forward to seeing you back here next week. In the meantime, God bless you. Have an awesome week. Have an awesome day. And I pray for God's light, God's strength, God's wisdom, God's power, God's mercy upon you, upon your family, upon your marriage, as you continue forward on your pathway of purity and as you continue to seek to be the Son of God that is well-pleasing to your Heavenly Father. So God bless you guys, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Visit powerofpurity.org for more resources and information. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, please invite a friend to listen. Until next time, remember, there's power in purity.